Greetings, adventurers, and welcome to the Lorkhon Saga Nutshell series. Ascendance is coming next week. This new story is the culmination of 5 years of ideas and storytelling, and in anticipation of the series, I've decided to create a collection of Lorkhon Saga Nutshell videos that will answer all of your burning questions about the story, how the concept was born. So in the last episode, we talked quite a bit about Vander and his mysterious connection to the other players in the Lorkhon Saga. In this episode, we are going to discuss the masterless thief Twist. Twist holds a special place in my heart for so many reasons. His personality, the epic and sweeping nature of his story, his evolution as a character, and the involvement of other characters in his story. He's certainly the most enigmatic of all the Lorkhon players. Yes, I am saying that despite the fact that Shadeling is present in this story. I would say that in many ways, Twist is a more mysterious character than even Shadeling himself. And he is also deceptively powerful. He is a fierce, untrusting, and superstitious loner with a knack for accumulating wealth and a strange and yet remarkably rational philosophy on life and the world. So let's dive into his story. So we're first introduced to Twist the Orc Thief in December of 2017. As he enters the city of Whiterun, he does not have a single septum to his name, and what we come to understand is that he is a thief with some previous experience coming from Cyrodiil to Skyrim to try to make his bones as a thief. The justification here is that he feels that there is perhaps less competition in Skyrim, and that there are some people here that could be potentially great teachers for him, that he could learn a lot, he could accumulate some wealth, and he could travel back to Cyrodiil to ply his trade. But the first problem he has is that he has arrived in Whiterun and he needs to book passage to Riften. And he doesn't have any money left. He's spent all of his money. So his goal is to go on a little mini crime spree in episode 1 to accumulate enough coins so that he can afford a carriage ride to Riften, which he does. So this character, he's very interesting. He's a paradox in so many different ways. He speaks in a foul and unsophisticated way that masks the depths of his actual intelligence. Viewers are also exposed to hours and hours of Twist's inner dialogue. This is him talking to himself both audibly and in his mind as he travels and as he has experiences. And what this does is it exposes us to all these intimate details of his personality, and yet, in the end, it seems as though we know less about his backstory than any of the other characters in the saga, even though he talks and talks and talks. He is at once an open book and a deep mystery, and that is one of the things I really love about this character. I think one of the characteristics of Twist that we discover over the course of 114 episodes in this series is that he is always in the present. He's always in the moment. Very seldom do we hear Twist talking about his past. Most of the time, he is commenting about what is going on in the moment, and sometimes we hear him also strategizing about his future plans, but very seldom do we hear him making references to his past. There are a few moments where this is highlighted, and we hear him in episode 10 talking at considerable length, sort of monologuing, if you will, about his past in the Orphanage, but it's difficult, nearly impossible to know for sure whether or not this is all a story that he's just making up or these are actual events that happened. So very early on in the series, he successfully travels to Riften and becomes a fledgling member of the Thieves Guild. Now, he is engaged in all of the story points that we would expect. He's going around Riften being a thug, gathering money for the guild, He is doing the Golden Glow missions. He's doing all of these things. But one of the things that happens that is of the most significance is that he is drawn to the orphanage. Honor Hall Orphanage is located in Riften, and it doesn't take long for Twist to be drawn to it. In fact, he says just before he goes into the orphanage that he's probably going to regret going in. And by that, it sort of implies that it is going to dredge up bad memories from his past. But for some reason, he feels compelled to go inside. And this is absolutely what happens. He goes inside that orphanage, and he overhears Grella the Kind speaking with the children and saying some very terrible things. After everyone has gone to sleep, he sneaks into Grellad's room. He picks her pockets and steals a book from her called Pig Children. We get the sense that he is looking for some proof of the terrible person that she really is. And after reading this book, which turns out to be a terrible sort of bigoted, racist diatribe against orcs, he basically snaps and he kills her in his sleep. Horrified by what he has done, he runs from Riften. Now, on his way out of the Honor Hall Orphanage, he hears one of the children refer to a child named Aventus Aretino and says, Aventus did it. Aventus got it done. And this name is planted in his brain. And it seems as though that Twist is having some sort of existential crisis. And it becomes clear to us in that moment that Twist has this sort of overdeveloped sense of justice. He is not a killer. He doesn't like killing people, but he doesn't hesitate when he sees injustice. And he certainly doesn't hesitate when he's dealing with quote-unquote criminals, of which he does not consider himself one. So what we discover is that he has basically injected himself into a Dark Brotherhood contract without really understanding that he's done this. He travels to Windhelm, he confronts Aventus Aretino and discovers that Aventus Aretino was calling upon the Dark Brotherhood to perform a contract killing of Grella the Kind, and suddenly realizes that he's already murdered Grellad. Well, of course, what you would expect to ensue does ensue. Well, the Dark Brotherhood catches wind of this, they abduct Twist, and he awakes to find himself confronted by Astrid in the abandoned shack. This is where things get interesting, because it is sort of revealed to us that Twist has apparently no interest in killing these people he's being asked to kill, but how much of it is actually about the killing and the fact that he's being asked to do it? He seems to have a very rebellious streak, and the idea that someone else would order him to do anything at all without promise of payment is absolutely ridiculous to him. And so what we see him do is actually talk his way out of doing any killing at all. He essentially stays up all night telling stories of his past, and eventually Astrid gives up. Eventually Astrid realizes that there's no way that she's going to be able to get him to perform this murder, and she essentially gives up and leaves. It is through this encounter that we are able to learn just a few little things about Twist. We hear a story or two from his days as an orphan. We also hear his theories on the difference between pointy-eared rabbits and floppy-eared rabbits. All of this kind of takes place in episode 10 and 11. And then we see him off and running again. What this does, though, is it shows us the links to which Twist will go to try to determine whether or not the things that he's doing are justified when it comes to murder. And it sort of establishes this idea that somewhere in there, that he is not a cold-blooded killer. He does value life, and he needs reasons for taking lives. And when he's on the course of a mission facing other criminals and things like that, he doesn't hesitate. But deep inside him, there is something there right? There's some sense of justice, some sense of decency. Unfortunately, we don't see it bubble to the surface very often. There are times when we will hear it bubble to the surface through his inner dialogues. What happens next? Well, one of the things that we see him do is he notices that people are talking about the Dragonborn. In some cases, they refer to him as the Dragonborn, and he cooks up a scheme where he decides that he is going to pose as the Dragonborn. He doesn't believe that he's the Dragonborn, but that he's going to pose as the Dragonborn because there's an opportunity to make big money. So, at that point, he begins referring to himself as the Dragonborn, but we see multiple occasions where he has the opportunity to actually absorb power from a word wall, but he avoids it. He gives the word walls a wide berth. He sees the effects. He hears the song of the word walls, but he avoids them, thinking that there is a curse of some sort involved. And this is where we start to really see his superstition bubble to the surface. We see him collecting matching cups. We see him avoiding goats at all costs. He seems to have some kind of real phobia when it comes to goats, and all kinds of really strange quirks. And these are not always explained. We don't always know where these come from. We hear him often using phrases like eyes open at all times, ears open at all times, talking about being observant and looking for opportunities to make money. So this Dragonborn scheme is just one of many schemes. We also see him start to talk about his own theories about Mercer Frey, and he seems to understand that something is wrong with Mercer Frey way before anyone else does. The moment that he enters the Thieves Guild and is first introduced to Mercer, he begins talking about how something is not right with Mercer, and we start to see him explore ways that he can uncover what's going on with the leader of the Thieves Guild. While this is going on, he's also committing more and more audacious robberies. Everything from robbing your Vasker to the Houses of the Dead to Dragon's Reach itself. He's constantly looking for more and bigger challenges, and he is literally stealing everything he can get his hands on. And this is when we see the introduction of Robard Graves. Now, around this time, because of Twist's continuing suspicion of Mercer Frey's motivations, he refuses to spend much time at all in the Rat Way. He just doesn't like going down there. He feels trapped. He doesn't trust Mercer. So he sets up shop in an old abandoned well in the mountains outside of Riften, and he makes that into his home. Well, shortly after doing so, he receives a mysterious note from a man named Robard Graves. This happens in around episode 38. Robard approaches him to make a deal. At first, Robard is complaining about how Twist has messed up many of his money-making endeavors through his thievery. However, he also acknowledges that Twist is one of the more talented thieves that he has ever seen in his life, and that perhaps there is an opportunity for them to work together. The deal that is struck is sort of a mutually beneficial arrangement in which Twist will help Robard open up a smuggling route to Bruma, and in exchange, Robard will use his considerable intelligence network to try to gather dirt on Mercer Frey and satisfy Twist's insatiable need to know what Mercer Frey is up to. They strike this bargain, and Twist embarks on an adventure into Bruma that takes us from episode 42 all the way to episode 81. He does many, many things in Bruma, and accumulates large amounts of wealth while he is there. But the most important thing that he does is he eliminates a very well-organized and large group of bandits there called the Cutters. The Cutters, as it turns out, are Robard's chief rivals in the region, And by dealing with and eliminating the cutters, Twist basically opens up a space in Bruma for Robard to begin operating. After about episode 81, Twist returns to Skyrim with plans to confront Mercer. Now, on his return to Skyrim, he has his first face-to-face meeting with Robard Graves. And this is a meeting in which Robard turns over a considerable amount of information he's gathered regarding Mercer to Twist. Among the things he reveals is that Mercer Frey has signed a contract with someone with whom Robard is vaguely acquainted to actually make renovations to his home. And these are secret renovations. Robard also reveals that a lot of money has been invested in the home, but none of the upgrades that are being made to the home are visible on the outside. So the speculation is that perhaps Mercer is tunneling down underneath or something like that. So we have a lot of information about Mercer being passed on to Twist, making Twist even more intensely interested in Mercer and his game. This all culminates in episode 93, where Twist travels with Mercer Frey to Snowvale Sanctum, in the far northern parts of Skyrim, and they are in pursuit of Carlia. Well, during this dungeon crawl, Twist is mistakenly poisoned by Carlia, and he witnesses an exchange between Carlia and Mercer Frey, and then is ultimately betrayed by Mercer and nearly killed. This puts him into a deep coma. And there is a segment where we actually have a revelation that Carlia is working with Robard, and Carlia knows Robard, and she relies on the help of Mr. Stacks and Robard to save Twist's life. And this is where we have the beginning of a long, sort of extended fever dream from the poison. So Twist has been poisoned by Carlia, and he has been put into this sort of catatonic state where he can't really move, and he is transported to a secret location in the swamps of Morthal, which we later learn is a mining town or a mining operation that is run by Robard Graves on behalf of the Silverbloods. And this is where they place Twist so that he can convalesce and recover from his wounds and from his poisoning. Well, during this poisoning, there is an out-of-body experience. He believes that he is being approached by the Daedric Prince Nocturnal, and Nocturnal leads him on this experience, an out-of-body experience, guiding him to Hammerfell and the Alakir deserts, where he pursues the legend of the Gray Fox. With this, Twist embarks on an epic journey into the deserts of Alakir to find out the secrets of the Gray Fox. And all the while that Twist is having this adventure in his mind or out of body or whatever it happens to be, Marl Keenlit and Robard Graves are working together in the real world to try to save Twist from what must almost assuredly be his death from this poison. The League of Prodigious Illumination arrives at Winstead Mine, and Marl is hired by Stacks and Robard to try and break Twist out of his coma. Throughout the adventure, we're cutting back and forth between Twist's coma-induced fever dream in the Alakir Desert and what's actually happening to his body in the real world as Marl attempts to revive him. The story culminates in Twist basically becoming the next Gray Fox and being transported back to Skyrim, where he encounters Shadeling. Shadeling invites him for tea and reveals that Twist's place in the pattern is unusual. He describes Twist as a rock in the middle of the stream that is Aetherius. And he also describes the nature of this mask, indicating that Twist has taken the first steps toward Ascendance. Basically, he says that Twist is the personification of chance. And they have this really interesting discussion about how Twist follows his gut and his philosophy on life. And we begin to understand that the way the Lorkhon particles manifest inside of Twist is in his ability to trust his gut, in his instincts. Somehow, the Lorkhon particles have enhanced and made super powerful Twist's gut instincts on everything that he encounters in his life. And this has led to his sort of uncanny ability to make wealth, his uncanny ability to stay alive in situations where most people would die, right? His seeming inexhaustible reserve of luck. Twist has basically taken the Lorkhon particles in and become quite literally the personification of chance. Shadling also tells him he is out of his body and not, in fact, asleep, and that there's a difference. Shadling indicates that Nocturnal is an entity that has the power to make this happen, but does not confirm that she is in fact responsible. In fact, he stops just short of saying that Nocturnal has anything at all to do with the predicament that Twist finds himself in right now. Shadling also sees through his scheme to pose as the Dragonborn and tells him that the real Dragonborn is on his way to Skyrim even now. The encounter with Shadling ends by Shadling describing to Twist that things have been done to his body in order to try to break him out of the coma. And we're kind of left hanging there. The understanding is that Twist is going to try to travel back to Winstead Mine and rejoin his physical body with this spirit entity that he has become. And we're never really sure whether or not that is actually successful. We never actually see that happen. And so that is a detail that is left hanging. What is the resolution of Twist from this state? Is there a resolution? All of this happens in episode 114, which is a very special episode because it is also a transition to the Barbarian storyline. The first half of the episode is focused on the tail end of Twist's story as he comes to this realization of what is actually going on with his spirit and his physical form. And then we transition into the introduction of the Barbarian storyline as Itastog, the true Dragonborn, enters Skyrim for the first time. Stay tuned for the next Nutshell episode, where we will discuss the origin and the role of Itastog, Barbarian and true Dragonborn. For more information, check the description for links to videos, podcasts, and resources that I've mentioned here. You will also find the definitive Lorkhon timeline explaining all the playlists, characters, and resources that are part of the Lorkhon Saga canon and the recommended viewing order. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Shit. All right, what's he doing now? Just hanging out? I'm not overly concerned about him right now. However, I am concerned about what that bastard's going to be doing when we leave, because the chances are we're going to have to leave in a big hurry.